Welcome back, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Leck. With me, as always, David Griscom.
How's it going, Matt?
It's going well. And joining us this evening, we are happy to be joined by Andrew Perez. He's a senior editor and reporter at The Lever, covering money and influence. I North Dakota me wants to say The Lever, but welcome, Andrew.
Thank you.
And tell us, what is The Lever? And what happened to the Daily Poster that we've all came to know and love? Because I just want to say, actually, before I let Andrew go, is if you watch a lot of this stuff on YouTube, none of this ecosystem could exist without the type of work that they do at the Daily Poster turned The Lever. Is this sort of like the actual intelligence that people are using to, opine on stuff. So this stuff is extremely valuable, and if you can, you should support it at levernews.com. So Andrew, what is The Lever?
Thank you. So The Lever is a reader-funded investigative news site. And we cover money and influence and, money and influence on policy. So like on healthcare, climate. And we're trying to, produce all original reporting for readers.
And this is the stuff I think that really, if you're kicking out for a bunch of different opinion shows, I think you should go to the actual source a little bit too. So I just would plug that. So let's dive in here, Andrew. You have a number of stories we're going to talk about. Let's start with this one here. Pharma Group to Sinema. We've got your back. This is from February. And I think what I like about the Daily Poster, and certain people might be relieved to hear, is they go at both Democrats and Republicans, of course, and particularly Sinema. And Manchin. So there's an ad here that I think we all need to watch. And it may give us something, make us feel a little bit something that we might not have felt about Kyrsten Sinema before.
Arizonans are tough and independent, just like Kyrsten Sinema. Every day, she fights to improve the lives of working families while protecting our pocketbooks. Like leading on the bipartisan infrastructure bill that controls costs, rebuilds our roads, and grows the Arizona economy with good jobs. Working tirelessly until the job is done right, just like we do here in Arizona. Thank Kyrsten Sinema and tell her keep fighting. We have your back, just like you've always had ours.
Now, so I just to point out one thing about that is fighting for the bipartisan infrastructure bill, but also blocking the real infrastructure bill that we actually needed, and Joe Biden ran on, the Build Back Better. So that's just one thing to know. But who is Center Forward, and why are they running this ad?
So Center Forward is effectively like what used to be called like the Blue Dog Coalition, but it's no longer just like a Democratic organization. It's bipartisan or nonpartisan. Anyway, they ostensibly support centrist politicians, but if you do even just kind of like cursory research into them, you find that they are funded by Pharma, Big Pharma, the main kind of lobbying group for them for the drug industry in DC. And, they're accounting for at least like a quarter of Center Forward's revenue over the last few years. And then, their board is also made up of a whole bunch of corporate lobbyists, including at least a handful who are working for Pharma and also a series of other drug companies. The context, here is, as you were mentioning, Sinema helped stall the kind of Biden agenda bill, the Build Back Better bill, which includes measures to reduce prescription drug prices by allowing Medicare to actually negotiate them, right? Like the government 20 something years ago banned Medicare from negotiating drug prices. This bill would allow Medicare to start doing that. And Sinema, for most of last year, over the summer, was sort of leading the charge to defang that measure to reduce its punch, and specifically kind of how much it would take away from Pharma, how many drugs you can negotiate. So it's been watered down considerably, but even if it were to pass, it's still would represent the first time that Medicare would be allowed to negotiate drug prices.
I mean, it's truly cynical to say that, Sinema's out there looking out for your pocketbooks when many people in Arizona very much are struggling to meet the ridiculous obligation to pay off their pharmaceutical bills at the end of the month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is definitely pretty absurd. And like the we have your back line is like, it felt for me like I was just like, no way, I can't believe they're saying this, right? Like, I guess they're sort of framing it as if they're a sort of group of people who are in Arizona, but that is not the case. Center Forward is basically a corporate front group that is registered in a Northern Virginia lobbyists McMansion and like McLean. It's ridiculous. Like that's its official address when you look up their like ad buys. Like it's just really, really obscene.
And that sort of phraseology is interesting in an ad like that, because there's also the look after your pocketbook, like David said, which directly after you mentioned that you love working people or whatever, that hits one way, but also it reads another way to like giant corporate donors probably and folks like that. I'm curious, like Sinema, these centrist or corporatists, like I gotta imagine like this sort of makeup of the Senate's been really good for them.
Yeah. Center Forward has run some ads. Well, what's funny is she's the kind of only person we've seen them running ads supporting. They had a very light pressure campaign on Joe Manchin, but yeah, they've been supporting Sinema for like several months now. They've run a whole bunch of ad campaigns. They've sent direct mail pieces. And then they've done some lighter advocacy for a few of the kind of pharma Dems in the House who kind of worked with Sinema to gut that measure. But Sinema's been their sort of pride and joy, like from an advertising standpoint.
Could you talk a little bit about, because Sinema's interesting, obviously, because of her role in the Senate, sort of like slowing down and frankly, gutting legislation that's geared to help out, regular working class Americans. So it's very clear that she's raking in some money. But how is that sort of affecting her on the ground? And is there is the money sort of looking like it's going to be enough to protect her in the long run?
Yeah. I guess I haven't seen polling so recently, but there's definitely been polls showing her struggling among Democrats. Like her approval is pretty underwater right now. And if you look into the polls, she's also struggling with independents.
Interesting.
I think some people think of like independents as like these, just people who make up their mind all the time, but that's, or who don't have any kind of ideology, but that's not really the case, right? It's like independents are generally like left leaning or right leaning for the most part. And she's doing very badly with independents. But the other thing is there's not a hell of a lot of constituency for like higher drug prices. Like this is one of the issues that is truly bipartisan. Like in that no one wants to pay higher drug prices. There is huge majority support for allowing Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. Obviously at a policy level, like many other countries do this. Pretty much every other country allows or already does that, right? Like we have carved out a special, predatory just base for the pharmaceutical industry here. Like, the House Democrats put together a study a few months ago showing that pharmaceutical companies have expressly targeted the U.S. for higher drug prices, and it's because they can.
Mm-hmm. Would you mind just for somebody who might be watching this and is not really following, could you put a little bit of meat as to like why having, the government being able to negotiate drug prices is so important, to keeping the cost down? Yeah,
Medicare is just a huge payer. So if they would, like, by them negotiating drug prices, it would lower drug prices for everyone in this country. Your insurance company is not going to want to pay 4 times what Medicare is paying. They might pay a little more because, there's that kind of agreement between private insurers and pharmaceutical companies and hospitals to all get to charge as much money as they want. But the other thing is actually this the Medicare prescription drug like measure was designed to allow private insurance to pay the same prices as Medicare. But I guess I'm not 100% sure if that part was sort of stripped out, or actually what's been an issue is there's been some question as to whether the parliamentarian, who I'm sure no one wants to hear about, the Senate parliamentarian might say that isn't quite, budget related if it's like a private insurance policy, paying the same amount as Medicare, like that it might be sort of extraneous, but we never really got that far since the legislation just completely stalled. I'm not sure she ever issued her ruling on those issues.
Yeah, I think we should move. Let's switch the order a little bit and go to this Fetterman versus Connor Lamb thing. Can you just give folks an outline of who Fetterman and Lamb are in this race before we get into some of the behind-the-scenes stuff?
Sure. So Connor Lamb is, sort of centrist, corporatist, maybe moderate Democrat in the House. He's won a few elections now. I think he was elected in 2017 or 2018. He was elected in a special, but he's in a district that has swung from like Trump to Biden to Trump. So it's a swing district, and he is sort of the moderate favorite for like at least DC moderates favorite for Senate. John Fetterman is is considered more progressive. He backed Bernie in 2016. And he is the lieutenant governor in Pennsylvania currently. I think he defeated like a sitting lieutenant governor in the primary a couple of years ago. So he I think had run for Senate some years ago too, and he's sort of built a statewide presence. Like I don't think people really appreciated that, but like he's done a lot of touring around the state. So that's anyway. The race is. Like Fetterman right now is considered to be leading, and Lamb is sort of disappointing so far.
And just for the purposes of for policy positions, Fetterman has talked nicely about single payer. What are what's he saying about healthcare now?
Yeah, I mean, he's making like a pitch for universal healthcare, though. He's not using like the words like single payer and Medicare for all. He did, so like some years ago, he had been like a pretty strong proponent of Medicare for all. Like was like, why aren't politicians talking about it kind of thing. He's probably running a slightly to the center of where he's been, but he's still considered like a single payer supporter.
And nonetheless, we got another group we have to learn about called Penn Progress. Who are they, and what's their message?
Sure. So they're a new super PAC. I guess they registered late last year, but they've been, for the last like month and a half, they've been talking about getting involved in this race. There's really not much about them. Like their website is, honestly, I think they only put up their website last week. Like same with their Facebook and Twitter account. Like they haven't posted anything. They don't say who they are. There's very limited information, and they have not started spending in the race yet. But what they are probably known for at this point is they last week Politico reported that Penn Progress has been reaching out to potential donors, basically saying like Fetterman is crushing our guy Lamb. Like he's up like 30 points on him, and like Lamb and like voters don't really see Fetterman as the liberal he is, and like the dynamics here are not going to change unless we get involved. And they started testing some potential negative attacks too, to say that if we launch all these highly misleading and negative attacks on John Fetterman, he might not be in as good a position as he is now. Several of those attacks were like, we're going to call him a socialist because he backed Bernie in 2016. We're going to say that he supports the $34 trillion government takeover of healthcare because he supports single payer. And what else? He supports defund the police is what they're going to say. And, his campaign has been pretty quick to say that's not true.
It sounds very Republican.
yeah. These attacks do sound Republican, but they, the healthcare industry one really piqued my interest because it's the exact kind of crap you hear from healthcare lobbyists. Like it is from Republicans and healthcare lobbyists. Because obviously, like, single payer is not a government takeover of healthcare. It's government takes the place of your private insurance, which most people who are on private insurance know that it, is not great, not good. No one likes it.
Unless you work there.
Yeah, and even then, unless you're like high up, you might not like it either. They might try to rally you to lobby against this stuff, but you're not like raking in big bucks like as like an administrative clerk in any of these companies. For sure. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I was going to say that the thing that we found, and it was out there actually, like on Google. So the guy who is leading this group, Penn Progress, his name is Eric Smith. He's a former like Obama 2008 and 2012 consultant. He runs this communications firm called 7 Letter. It used to be called Blue Engine Message and Media. I don't know if people know who these people are, but anyway, 7 Letter, according to these corporate filings that we found that were pretty readily available, 7 Letter works for Cigna, and like the health insurer Cigna, and also some other kind of corporate lobbying groups, and companies like Airmark that are like food service companies, or basically a bunch of big kind of corporate interests. And obviously Cigna has some thoughts on single payer healthcare or anything in between what we have now and that, right? Like they also oppose they threatened to leave Connecticut over Connecticut trying to institute a very weak state public option, like a state public health insurance plan, which their threat kind of killed it a few years ago.
But Andrew, I mean, apparently this is progressive politics. I mean, this is from the piece y'all published in the Lever. Sorry. This is Eric Smith's response to y'all. It says, "I'm a volunteer for this effort because I'm a progressive who believes that maintaining control of the U.S. Senate is critical to the success of the Biden administration. He rejected the idea that attacking Fetterman could benefit his firm's clients, calling it untrue and inaccurate."
Yeah. No, we found that interesting.
Just let that sit there. You know what I mean?
Well, one note on that is that this we need to let everybody know how much of a socialist the guy kicking my candidate's ass in this election is. We need to let everyone know how socialist he is because we need to beat Dr. Oz. And actually, like, is in a head-to-head matchup, is that the case? Does it look like that Connor Lamb is the Dr. Oz slayer?
It doesn't yet. According to Penn Progress's own polling that Politico obtained, John Fetterman has a significantly better lead against Dr. Oz, who is, yes, a Senate candidate, than Connor Lamb. Yes. There was a lot there to appreciate. The I'm a progressive part. I mean, I was like talking with like another like reporter I know about this. He was saying, like moderates will argue that like we need like Democrats won't hold the Senate if it's Fetterman. And it's like, yeah, they will argue that, but I don't know if I would, ever be convinced of that.
Yeah. I mean, it is, I just wish like, maybe we're getting to the point because you see occasionally like these like Madison Cawthorn praising Joe Manchin as a statesman, like this understanding of like moderate quote unquote Democrats are basically just like reactionaries in blue. But let's skip over to the other side of the aisle. Well, not entirely because Joe Manchin, but the Koch brothers. Let's talk about the Kochs. And I'm curious, like as a reporter on this beat, the Koch brothers, explain Charles Koch, the remaining sort of active political member, who they are, and are they sort of a moon type of a dominant dark money force, or are they like sort of the Big Dipper in a constellation of right-wing money? If that's a little bit too confusing, but like I'm curious, like some people say that Jane Mayer's book, for instance, overemphasized the role of the Koch brothers, and you hear this criticism a lot, and I kind of just think it's something to a way to have a criticism, because like any text can only focus on like a certain amount of things. But I'm curious about the Koch brothers generally, and then tell us what they're up to in West Virginia.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, okay, like, yes, there are some other conservative funders who are, I guess, actually spreading the money around in a significant way. But the Kochs, Charles Koch, David Koch, who died a few years ago, they really kind of, I mean, you know, they seeded so many of the conservative groups we see right now. And like in 2010, like they financed the Tea Party movement pretty single-handedly, or maybe not single-handedly, but they had a very big effect on that. And, you know, they fund, I mean, you know, they fund hyper-conservative like advocacy groups. They fund universities, like they fund like university programs, like, like, you know, like Mercatus, like the big like economics, like long economics program at George Mason University. Like, yeah, they're influential, and they also run like their own kind of advocacy groups beyond just financing this sphere of conservative advocacy. You know, Americans for Prosperity is a very big election spender, and that's theirs. You know, they have this group called Stand Together that finances both Americans for Prosperity and a million other conservative groups. And so, like, you know, I think you'll sometimes see like pundits be like conservative pundits be like, oh, like everyone like kind of mocking the idea that like Charles Koch controls the world. Like, okay, maybe he doesn't control the world, but he definitely finances their groups most of the time, right? Like, so it's, yeah, I mean, there is a point to what they're saying, but it's not like entirely legit either.
Yeah. It's like, it's one thing to make that criticism and say, let's talk more about like the Scafee Foundation and like those other groups versus let's hand wave away the effective influence of like fossil fuel oligarchs and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, and so, okay, like Charles Koch, they host, his network hosts like this big conference every year for like other conservative donors where like they're all making decisions about who to give money to. Like, right. You know, they don't fund everything. Like there are other financiers here, but like often like the Koch network like kind of helps organize it.
It coordinates it. Okay.
Yeah. And like, you know, they lobby at the state level, the federal level. Like they have a lot of influence. And okay, so should we talk about this story then?
Yeah.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah. So the story that we reported on them is that there's this West Virginia attorney general is trying to overturn basically the EPA's ability to regulate greenhouse gases, saying that it's not in the EPA's authority under the Clean Air Act. And yeah, we just looked through, you know, Sheldon Whitehouse, the senator from Rhode Island, has been really big on this, like talking about like this kind of amicus brief like pipeline where like conservative groups or the Kochs are financing these conservative groups that then file like legal briefs in these Supreme Court cases and down the line too, where they then are making the like intellectual case for overturning, you know, every regulation you can think of. And that's what we've seen here. And, you know, we'd reported this a few months back too, or maybe it was sometime last year. Like Charles Koch has recently, you know, he's best known for being in the oil and gas industry, but he also has during the pandemic started buying up started investing in real estate, like residential real estate, you know, like single family home companies actually in particular. And he was funding these conservative groups that were, you know, also suing to overturn the COVID eviction ban, the federal eviction moratorium. So it's something you kind of see over and over again. You know, you look up, you're like, who are these groups involved in these briefs, or like who are filing these briefs in the Supreme Court case, and you just Google them. You're like, oh, Koch funded, and it's you know, sometimes like you might see like $10,000. Like, okay, in that world, in this world, that is not real money, right? In the conservative or in the nonprofit world, like $10,000 isn't terribly meaningful. but like sometimes it's $1 million a year, and it's like, okay, that's half the organization or more. And that's what we saw with a bunch of these groups, is that they've given millions of dollars to some of them.
And I mean, I'm sure most of our listeners, and certainly people who are reading y'all's work, are familiar with this, but it is just worth noting that, like, a lot of times when people talk about money and politics, there's a kind of fixation on congressional donations, and obviously that matters a lot. But if the past few years have taught us anything, it's that the right wing is very, very committed right now to using the legal sphere to also pursue their kind of policy goals, and that can be just as damaging as giving a donation to a kind of right-wing congressional candidate that puts them over the top. I mean, creating a kind of legal apparatus that can undermine, decisions of democratically elected governments is just as worrying, if not more worrying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the outside groups here are like the real money more often than not, right? Like people will see, they're like, okay, all these companies donated to these lawmakers who voted to overturn the election, right? Like, that's a story, but like the real story in all of that is always going to be like, okay, the House GOP, the House Republicans have a dark money arm and a super PAC, and those groups can accept, they're not bound by any kind of like contribution limit, right? Like there's like a $2,900 contribution limit for a political campaign for federal candidates for office, at least from individuals. But you can give $1 million to a super PAC backing that candidate. Like you can get a lot more bang for your buck through outside groups, or at least you can put a lot more money in. And that's we try to follow that money as much as we can, because it's just, to us it is obvious that's where the influence is.
And this also creates a whole ecosystem and relationships too. I mean, obviously a lot of lawmakers, people who run for office later, are people in the law profession. And if your entire life, law school, post law school, you're sort of inundated with these kind of conservative money groups. Again, even if it's not the same as directly funding a group or a congressional candidate or anything like that, these are the kind of people. If I spend time with them, if I associate myself with them, then I'll be, sort of rolling in it, and it's really great, especially if you have very much, floating personal political positions. But that really creates an apparatus that can pull in a lot of younger people to be, the next generation of firebrands in the conservative movement too. I mean, this is not an accident. They're not just throwing money at the wall. They understand that this gets results in the long term too.
Oh yeah, I mean, Turning Point USA is is a great example of that. That's a group, and that's a group that's like grown over the last few years. And I guess for people who don't know who they are, and maybe a lot of people who do know who they are because they're so goofy. But like it's like a conservatives on campus group, and it has like, they organize nationally. They throw these big rager conferences. And I'm sure Rager is overselling it. I'm sure I'm overselling it because I've been to CPAC several times, and it is horrible. And but everyone there is a child.
Is the food good at least? I don't know.
No. It's everyone there is a child and like has never been kissed, and that's fine. It's fine. Like, but like Turning Point USA is like the adult teen version of that, right? The young adult version, and they get a lot of money from. Like, for instance, Leonard Leo runs this dark money network. He was Trump's top judicial advisor, and he is a longtime executive at the Federalist Society, which is like a conservative lawyers network. If you look up the Federalist Society, like every member of the Trump administration is a FedSoc member. Like, it's not just judges; it's like every conservative lawyer. Leonard Leo also runs this like side dark money network that helped pack the court, right? It helped install all these conservative justices. They also give money to Turning Point USA. They give like millions of dollars every year to him. And I think that he's received some Koch money too. Like or by he, I mean like Charlie Kirk, the guy who runs Turning Point USA. So yeah, okay.
No, that's great. I mean, I feel like there's some fracking stuff buying Kirk, I know, and that sort of stuff. I want to get just lay out the stakes for this attack on the EPA's authority to regulate this stuff, because and I think this is right, but correct me if I'm wrong, but this is about like a case to do with Chevron and what's known as like Chevron Deference, basically that like government bureaucracies are allowed to say like, hey, this is a pollutant, we can regulate that, as opposed to basically making Congress go over it. Is that basically it?
Well, so the Clean Air Act like allows Congress to, allows the EPA to regulate like pollutants, like stuff that like pollutes the air. And what these conservative groups are saying is that like, okay, that's too broad. Like we basically need like a new law every time there's a new pollutant the government wants to regulate. Instead of saying we want to regulate greenhouse gases, you know, instead of the EPA saying that, we're actually going to have to the Congress is going to have to send them a bill saying you can regulate carbon emissions, you know, and obviously the context here is we're all going to die, right? Like we under that scenario, right? Like we have like limited time to be making big changes to in how we, you know, use energy, and that this kind of, you know, rule, it would be catastrophic, and it wouldn't only affect like climate either. It would affect like the whole federal like agency's ability to regulate and do the job that they're supposed to be doing. Yeah,
it's a real like libertarian wet dream. Sort of. Yeah. Well, Andrew, thanks. You can check in with Andrew over at the levernews.com. Give us another plug for Lever News.
Yeah, so it is a reader-funded investigative news site. We're covering money and influence, and yeah, we could definitely use your support. We rely on readers, and you know, we've been pretty successful so far. We're growing. We're hoping to launch some new products soon. Right now, it's, you know, a newsletter you get in your inbox every day, but we're hoping to be adding new products soon and more stuff.
Have you thought about doing like a fake right-wing outlet to try to soak up a whole bunch of cash and then just like shovel it to like your actual good work that you do? Because me and David could maybe like put on some like MAGA hats and try to do a fake.
Yeah. Officially speaking, no, I have not.
Okay, good. All right. Andrew Perez, thank you so much for joining us. It's Andrew Perez DC at Andrew Perez DC on Twitter. Go follow him, folks.
Thank you.